Now we have the president of Planned Parenthood, Alexis McGill Johnson. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, most importantly, because we're in such a period of uncertainty right now, can you speak on the fact that Roe is still the law as of right now?
Yes, absolutely. What we saw last week was a draft opinion from the Supreme Court. They have not formally ruled. Roe is still the law of the land, which means that if you are waking up and you need an appointment at a abortion provider in your state, check the local laws to make sure what the restrictions are, or go to abortionfinder.com to help you understand how to navigate. But yes, abortion is still legal right now.
When abortion restrictions are put in place, to what extent does it stop abortions, and to what extent are they just pushed into other states or even underground?
No abortion restrictions, even the ones pre-1973, stopped people seeking access to abortion. I think in many cases, what they stopped 50 years ago was access to safe abortion. What we have now is, a patchwork of restrictions that have essentially pushed people further into a burden of trying to seek access to abortion, but they haven't stopped people from actually accessing the procedure or the medication abortion that they need.
Now, in terms of traveling to nearby states, if you live in southern Louisiana or Mississippi or Alabama or Florida, your closest state is either Kansas or North Carolina. Like Miami to North Carolina is a 12-hour drive. New Orleans to Wichita, Kansas is 13 hours. If you're in eastern Montana, you're looking at either 11 hours to go to Washington or 8 hours to go to Minnesota. What happens to these women?
Well, look, I mean, I think what you're pointing to is even now, right, with the number of restrictions that already exist while we have the right, means that access is very limited. There are abortion provider deserts in many of the states that you were talking about, meaning that people are traveling 4 to 5 hours just to get access to abortion provider in their state. So when or if Roe is overturned, as we presume it will be, it means that people will now have to travel thousands of miles outside of their state, outside of perhaps their even comfort zone. It means they will have to put their children in the car because most people who access abortion are already parents. It means that they will have to gather the resources necessary for gas money, for hotel money. And, with the number of restrictions that already exist in place on accessing abortion, the number of restrictions that ask people essentially, whether or not they trust the decision that they are making, it means that they're imposing significant burdens on them wherever they go.
We hear the anti-choice crowd wail about the sanctity of life, and yet none of that care or compassion actually exists once the baby is actually born. Can you speak on where the U.S. stands in terms of these health metrics for maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates, and even newborn programs and care and funding compared with other developed countries?
Yes, absolutely. Look, I mean, the same states that are enacting the most restrictive abortion bans are also the same states that have some of the worst maternal health outcomes in this country, and the most significant restrictions on abortion provision. So, the maternal mortality rate in this country is somewhere between 3 to 4 times Black women are more likely to die than white women after childbirth. We also see, significant infant mortality rates where children in Black communities are less likely to make it to a year than white families. And so, the reality is these are states that have not elected to expand Medicaid, right, to accept the Affordable Care Act coverage. These are states that have fought against things like paid family leave. And so all of the things that you would expect to really help nurture a newborn are not things that actually exist in these states. And so the fact that they are also now creating more onerous abortion restrictions is just kind of mind-boggling.
And not just that. I mean, we have early education funding, the child tax credit, universal pre-K, childcare. I mean, every opportunity these people had to actually vote for the things that would back up what they wail about on an endless loop, they voted against it time and time again. So I think it just kind of puts on full display how much they actually care about the sanctity of life, that they're not even willing to put a single one of their votes or a single dime behind any of this stuff when it actually matters.
Well, Sister Simone Campbell, an extraordinary Catholic nun, often says that, you know, she's a pro-choice Catholic nun, as she describes herself. She says all these people are pro-birth; they're not actually pro-child.
I'm sure that you, of all people, have heard every story under the sun about why having safe and legal access to abortion is important. Could you share one example that you think kind of best illustrates why we need this? Like, it's become so political that I feel like we kind of forget sometimes how personal it is. So I think having a story might help highlight that for people.
You know, I mean, look, I hear a story every day, you know, when I tell people that I work for Planned Parenthood, you know, people open up and they share their personal story, they share their sister's story, they share their parents' story, their mother's story, their cousin's story, all because they've understood, you know, at some point what this decision has made for them in their lives. 1 out of 4 people who could give birth has had an abortion in their lifetime. And so just the numerically normalization is so important. But I'll tell you a quick story of somebody I was on the plane with a couple of years back when I first stepped into this role. She was a amazing aeronautical engineer, and we happened to be going through some turbulence. And so to calm my nerves, she just explained to me what was happening in each vector as the plane turned. And at the end of our trip, I just said, thank you so much. Like that was a great way to, you know, go through a really quite literally turbulent time. And she said, no, thank you. Because if it weren't for the abortion that I had at 19, I would have never been able to continue my graduate career and end up in the role of working for the FAA that I do now. Right. And that is just an everyday story. I think sometimes we think about, you know, abortion care, the way it's been presented as, you know, it's always a, you know, dramatic, traumatic experience for people. And I think for many people who are seeking access to care, it's a logical step in their own life journey of when they decide that it's right for them to become a parent or a parent again. And that's what we have to respect, Brian, right? The fact that people can make decisions, and we should trust the decisions that they make about their own lives and their own journeys and their own careers and their own families and communities. And what people most don't want is to have a politician in the middle of that decision with them.
You know, we go back and forth talking like decrying the, you know, extolling the virtues of this or decrying the, you know, the vices of that. But at the end of the day, it's not our choice. Like it's everybody's own choice to have autonomy over their own body. And so I think that's like kind of what gets forgotten or left out of so much of these political arguments. Okay, so by the time that this interview airs, there will have been marches in every state in the country this past Saturday. Can you talk about what you hope that these marches will accomplish and why they're important?
Yes. I mean, look, on May 14th, I was in Los Angeles. There were, 100,000 people who had RSVP'd to attend this rally, and across the country, there were upwards of 200 events of folks assembling. And I think in this moment, we were 2 weeks past the draft opinion being leaked and the reality setting in that the court is fully sure that they will likely overturn Roe v. Wade. And so I think it's a few things. One, it's so important to be together in a moment, right? We are literally mourning a right that we have lost, or anticipate losing, one that we've held on to for 49 years. Two, I think it's important to demonstrate, right, that we are the collective super majority of people who believe, right, the 80% of people who believe that Roe should be the law of the land, people that believe that we should be making these decisions about our own bodies. Anything less than our ability to do that is a function of the power and control of state lawmakers and federal lawmakers. And I think that, three, these marches were about marching orders, quite literally, right? Telling people like how to capture the rage, how to ensure that they understood kind of what was at stake and how we have to move this forward.
So I think a lot of people are looking to help and not necessarily knowing how to be most helpful. What could people do right now?
So as of right now, first, we want people to understand abortion is still legal, right? It is still their right. It may not be the case in a few weeks. So what's really important right now is to keep up the momentum. What's really important right now is to make sure that people understand your outrage and particularly elected officials, because We know that when the federal protections are gone, if the court overturns Roe v. Wade, it means that every state now will be making decisions on its own. And it is important for your state lawmakers to hear where you stand, whether you are in a state that is going to restrict access. It means that you need to show up and let them know that that you won't tolerate that, or if a state where there's an opportunity to actually expand access, to make sure that those states stay and remain free havens for people who need to access abortion. Second thing you can do is actually amplify abortionfinder.org. This is for people who are seeking care, for people who need travel, for people who need access to Planned Parenthood health centers, independent providers. It ensures that that we are both supporting the navigation of patient care. And the last thing you can do is support abortion funds. You can support local affiliates of Planned Parenthood. You can support independent providers at keepourclinics.org or the National Network of Abortion Funds. Those are all places that will continue to help people get the care that they need.
Politics aside, what's your message to the people of this country right now who are scared and looking at organizations like yours for help in light of what's become a really, draconian turn of events?
Look, first I want to tell them we're clear, right? We will not go back. We will not back down. We're going to be here fighting for this right for as long as we can. We know that the future state cannot be flying people across the country, putting people on buses to go thousands of miles just to seek access to care that they could very well have in their own zip code. That makes no sense. For 50 years almost, we've enjoyed the ability to make these decisions, the privacy of our own homes and doctors' offices down the street from where we live. We won't go back to what that state of affairs will be, and we're going to be here fighting with them.
Great. We'll leave it there. Alexis, thank you for the work that you do and the rest of Planned Parenthood. And, best of luck as we keep trying to navigate what's become a really hellish situation, but glad to have you fighting.
Thank you so much, Brian, for having me.